Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with each and every one of you. And let me say, on June 7th, in just a few months, you'll be asked to vote for the next mayor of the great city of Los Angeles. And the questions are very simple. What kind of city do we want to live in? Do we want a city that only works for the super rich and the elite, or do we want a city that works for people like us, working people, community people? Do we want to live in safe neighborhoods where our families can afford to raise their children? Or do we want some of the same empty promises, or a doer who understands the challenges that you are facing and will act with a sense of urgency to solve our biggest problems? And I was born right here in downtown Los Angeles to an immigrant mother, a single immigrant mother with a third grade education, a woman who worked her fingers to the bone, spending the vast majority of her life taking care of the very wealthy. And at a very young age, she taught me the value of hard work, that good things don't come easy for people like us, people who are often overlooked and underestimated, underappreciated and undervalued. And like so many Angelenos, I know what it feels like to live on the margins, from renting a room in an already crowded house to renting a room beneath the house in the basement. There are too many of us who know what it feels like to work 2, perhaps even 3 jobs just to put food on the table, the clothes on the back of our children. And we know what it's like to wonder whether we'll have enough money to pay the rent, or just to keep living in the city that we love as Angelenos. Now, I've lived that life, and I've walked, not just one day, but a better part of my life in working people's shoes. And it's why we are doers. We work hard, we keep our nose to the grindstone, we keep our head down, and we fight like hell for everything that we have. You give me the honor of becoming your next mayor of the city of Los Angeles. I have no doubt that we can take on and overcome the greatest challenges that are before us. So from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you, to all the wonderful members of CAUSE, I thank you for this opportunity. I grew up in a neighborhood that had its fair share of violence. So I know what it feels like to feel unsafe. And I think the most important job of any mayor, any city in the country, but especially like a city like Los Angeles, is to make sure that all Angelenos just don't feel safe, but in fact are safe. And that our LAPD officers treat everybody, regardless of your zip code, with dignity and respect. Now, I can say this is that, a lot of folks can come forward and talk about hiring thousands of more police officers. But before we even had that conversation, we need to get our own house in order. And as mayor of the great city of Los Angeles, the first thing I have to do is make sure that we utilize, in a much more effective and efficient manner, our resources, so we can maximize our dollars in such a way that we can focus on preventing as well as solving crimes. 2, I'd hire mental health specialists, which are so critical, because I don't want our LAPD officers on the mental health front lines. I want them dealing, with crimes. I want them to be back on the line of duty. At any given moment, we can have LAPD officers dealing with someone who perhaps is half naked, having a psychotic breakdown, on any street in Los Angeles. I don't want them there, because at that precise moment, there's someone who's a victim of gun violence, or there's a small mom and pop store or restaurant that has just been robbed, or a personal residential, neighborhood has just been burglarized. I want to utilize our officers in a much more effective manner, which is critical. I want to make sure that we professionalize our LAPD reserves so we can utilize them in a much more effective manner. I don't want to utilize our LAPD reserves to be putting orange cones and directing traffic when we have an event at LA Live or elsewhere. I want them on the streets, and whether that is dealing, for example, on Spring Street or Main Street, whether it is on Ventura Boulevard or Lancashire, whether it's on Melrose or our very own Chinatown or Koreatown, where we see a lot of API hate taking place because of our Asian American communities throughout the great city of Los Angeles. I want to utilize our police officers in a much more effective manner, where we see the trends and where we see the hot spots throughout the city of LA. The spike in crime, and we see the trends, are not unique to Los Angeles. They're happening throughout the state of California. They're happening throughout the country. But when you are a victim of a crime, it is something that feels very unique, some very individualized, something that's deeply personal. When you have been attacked, when you have been assaulted, when you have been robbed. And that's why we have to better utilize our resources in a much more effective manner. Listen, we can talk about, throwing numbers out there from 1,500 to 250. This is not a game of the price is right, where folks are just throwing out numbers without any data as to what demonstrates effective policing throughout the city of LA, but more effectively in Koreatown, in Chinatown, in Little Tokyo, in Thai Town, in Filipino Town, in Little Bangladeshi. These 5 community areas of API community members are the areas that I had the honor to represent when I was your leader of your California State Senate. And I've always stood strongly in solidarity, but the tensions have heightened even more so, and the racial crimes incredibly so. And we have seen such a huge exponential rise in hate crimes against our API community members, but the majority of them are happening within the city limits of Los Angeles. That's why we have to be in high alert. And that's why we have a physical presence of our LAPD officers. And that's how we better utilize the current resources that we have today. If we're going to send a very clear message that API hate won't be tolerated, won't be accepted in the city of Angels. We know it's happening. And that's why as leader, you have to set the tone and culture. And if given the opportunity, I believe I'll be the first Latino Asian in the history of the city of LA to lead this great city. I know we tried at one time with then Councilmember Michael Wu, who attempted to become the first Chinese American, first Asian American to become leader of this great city. He came up short, obviously, but now this is another opportunity to make sure we have someone who understands what our API communities are going through every single day. I think that voters have every right to feel frustrated. They have every right to feel angry. It doesn't make a difference if you're on the left or if you're on the right or points in between. I've only been a city council member for 1 year and 3 months now. In that very short period, I've housed more individuals than anyone in the entire city of Los Angeles. In that short period, city council has already unanimously adopted my vision, 25 by 25. 25,000 housing units, whether it's construction or acquisition, by the year 2025. In that short time period I've been here, I've already constructed the largest tiny home village in the United States of America. It's right off the 110 freeway, off the Arroyo Seco in Highland Park. And in fact, in roughly about 10 days, I'll be opening up another tiny village in Eagle Rock, Figueroa in Colorado. I've already transformed 3 hotels into temporary housing as well as permanent housing. We're moving with a sense of urgency because I think that the humanitarian crisis that has been impacting the city of LA, not for years, but for decades. And to put this in context, so we can understand the magnitude of this humanitarian crisis, I represent a district that has more unhoused individuals than any other district in the entire city of Los Angeles. In fact, I have more unhoused neighbors in my district than any metropolitan city in America, except for 3, New York, Los Angeles in the aggregate, and Chicago. So I have more unhoused neighbors than the homeless population in its totality in the cities of Houston and Phoenix, the 4th and 5th largest cities in America. So that gives you an idea of how grave this situation is with regards to our unhoused neighbors living on the streets for years, if not decades. That's why we have to move with a sense of urgency. Listen, we can move, we can move heaven and earth to build football stadiums as well as basketball arenas. But somehow, some way, the machine of progress grinds to a screeching halt when it comes to either building or acquiring the roofs that are necessary to get our unhoused neighbors off the streets, off the sidewalks, off the alleyways, out of their cars, out of our parks, and into housing where you can have your own bed, clean sheets and clean towels, your own bathroom, your own shower, a locked door, your own HVAC system, air conditioning when it's super hot, or a heater when it's super cold. That's what we owe our unhoused neighbors because it's good for our community, it's good for our neighbors, it's good for the city of LA, it's good for children, So they don't see what they see every single day and they think it's normal. It's good for our businesses, and more importantly, it's good for our unhoused neighbors. So right now, it's a question of leadership. And I think that what I've done so far so successfully in City 14, what I want to do is I want to duplicate that across the city of Los Angeles. And I'm the only council member, I'm the only elected official, period, that has housed more individuals. That's why I'm not waiting for either the title of mayor or waiting to become mayor to lead on this issue, because I'm doing something about it right now. Small businesses, in particular, mom and pop, minority-owned businesses were eviscerated. They were absolutely devastated the past few years because of the coronavirus. These are businesses that don't have a lot of capitalization. They're barely holding on to begin with by a shoestring. And that was before coronavirus, with all the challenges that they had before them. Obviously, what the coronavirus has done is that it has really exposed the inequities between the haves and have-nots. Sadly, actually, the rich got richer during the pandemic, and the poor got poorer. So small businesses are the backbone of our economy of a great city like Los Angeles. But to understand how important small businesses are, listen, we're not the federal government. We don't have a treasury department, where we have in the basement, perhaps a printing press where you can print money and run ongoing debt. We're not the city of California, where we have surplus dollars, billions upon billions of surplus dollars, because the ability to have capital gains taxes, PIT, personal income tax. We rely on three main pillars for our revenues for the general fund of the city of Los Angeles. That is hospitality, that's hotels, that is property taxes, as well as our small businesses, small mom and pop restaurants, small mom and pop bars, small mom and pop businesses. And two of those three were absolutely decimated because of the coronavirus. And that's why we need to make sure, if we're going to be successful in terms of our economic recovery and have the revenues that are necessary, so we can have safe neighborhoods, so we can have clean streets, and a lot cleaner than the status quo of today. So we can make sure we build up our sanitation department, so we can make sure that our fire department is ready and prepared to make sure that we can live in a city that we all deserve. Small businesses have to be successful. And that's why working with our partners in the state legislature is going to be very critical, but also to what can we do as a city to make it much more efficient and cut all the red tape, all the unnecessary bureaucracies that make life actually harder for our small businesses. Changing the culture. We need a culture that says, 1, we respect you. 2, we welcome you. 3, we want you to be successful. And in order for you to be successful, we need to get us out of the way. Certain regulations, without a doubt, are very, very important. Sometimes some regulations are outdated. They're unnecessary. They're not germane, especially when we're positioned where we have to recover greatly. And especially if there is congressional change in Washington, D.C., any federal dollars will be much more challenging. And that's why we ourselves have to take control of our own destiny. That means creating a culture within City Hall that's conducive for small businesses, but in particular, our mom and pop, Chinese American and Filipino American and Korean American, Asian American in general, in small mom and pops are absolutely critical. We need to welcome them, not, have an attitude that is like, we repel them. We need them to be successful, because if they're successful, then we're successful as a city. If they go down, there's less revenues to the coffers of City Hall. And that means we're in trouble overall. So we need to make better efficiencies. We need to cut through all the bureaucratic red tape and make it easier to facilitate that business. So when people come to enjoy, whether it's a good meal, whether they go to a hardware store, whatever it is, whether they go buy, toys, in the toy district, whatever it is, let's make life easier for them. Well, this is an issue, once again, I'm not waiting for the title of mayor to lead on this issue, because I've been leading on this issue already. I was the author, joint author, as well as I actually wrote Assembly Concurrent Resolution number 42, which actually issued the first apology to Chinese Americans due to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was originally drafted up in our state capital before it became federal law. That was a model and a template that Representative Judy Chu, as well as then Representative Mike Honda from the Bay Area, utilized at the national level, at the federal level, to utilize when we issued the first apology for the abhorrent treatment of Chinese Americans who came, primarily from the Guangzhou region, the Cantons, region, the larger diaspora going through, migrating to other parts of the world, but especially in California, when we build out, our railroad system and moving commerce and the transcontinental railroad that further, evolutionized, the great state of California, on issues such as, again, representing all of our historic Filipino town and Thai town, a little Bangladeshi, and a little Tokyo and Chinatown and Koreatown, standing up for comfort women, women, who are utilized, physically, for hard labor as well as exploited sexually, and standing up and moving motions and resolutions, giving them voice, for the women and comfort women. And even though that happened in another continent across the Pacific Ocean, it has a huge impact on who we are as Asian Americans. Investing, more than $5 million for our Budokan, when we, officially cut that ribbon ceremony, even though we've opened it up already in Little Tokyo. That came from my AB 31. Wasn't all of the money, but it was a good portion of that money in terms of helping establishing our very own Budokan in Little Tokyo, and so many other measures that we have done. I know it's been controversial among all of our communities, the whole issue, how do we deal with the issue of affirmative action and entrance, to University of California, would be Berkeley, would be UCLA, UC Irvine, UC San Diego, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, Riverside, Davis, and our campus in Merced in Central Valley. I moved, more than $200 million, $200 million, into communities of color, where if you were a working class Chinese American, if you're a working class Latino, if you're a working class African American, that you could access those dollars so we can have A through G requirements, so they could have those advanced placement classes, which are not, in fact, universal on all high school campuses. So instead of pitting one group against another, how can we grow together? Remember, we had that press conference in Alhambra, in fact, and we had a large coalition of Chinese Americans coming together, how we can be together and move the policies that have a huge impact, a positive impact on the human condition. I become your next mayor of the great city of Los Angeles, the second largest city in all of America, with a huge Asian American population. That one of my deputy mayors clearly will be Asian American. And when we talk about commissions, and we talk about it'll be a reflection of who we are as a great city, our present and our future. I think they should definitely go to Little Tokyo. I think they should definitely go to Koreatown. They should definitely go to Chinatown. I think they should go to Plaza Mariachi in Boyle Heights. I would love for them to go to Grand Central Market because it's sort of a microcosm of who we are in the great city of LA. Oftentimes, I know that the narrative for LA has been Hollywood, and film and TV. I don't think people realize that LA really is a working class city. They're the people who actually make the city go. They make the city work. And without all of our immigrants, quite frankly, we wouldn't exist as a great city. Although the narrative globally, that branding has worked so successfully for Hollywood. We have some amazing neighborhoods. And when folks realize, how incredibly diverse the city of LA is, with, again, Chinatown, Little Tokyo, and Filipino town, and historic Filipino town, and Koreatown, and Little Bangladeshi, and Thai town. That beautiful tapestry, that amazing mosaic, that's actually the strength of who we are as a great city. So when you're in a position of power, you have a real opportunity that's tangible, that's measurable, where you put individuals in those positions of power to effectuate the positive changes that we need as a great city like Los Angeles during a very difficult time where we can grow together. So I think it'd be very important. wherever part of the world that you come from, that when you come to LA, that you get a taste of the vibrancy of our diversity in the city of LA, because that's our strength.